Have you ever settled into a seat that felt like a dream come true? Not just a seat, but a promise. A place where the world felt momentarily at your fingertips, where the worries of the ground faded, replaced by the sheer boundless possibility of the sky. That's what first class felt like. It's a hushed world of plush leather attentive service, and an almost sacred quiet that separates you from the hurried bustle of the world outside. For Naomi Hayes, a brilliant 16-year-old with a mind that literally reached for the stars, this wasn't just a luxury. It was a launch pad. Naomi wasn't born into first class. Her journey here was paved with late nights' diligent study and an insatiable curiosity about the universe. Her dream wasn't just to fly in the sky. It was to understand how the sky worked, how galaxies spun, how stars ignited. She was an aspiring astrophysicist, a prodigy in her own right, and this flight was a crucial stepping stone. She was on her way to the prestigious Cosmic Frontiers Summit, a national STEM conference for young innovators, a spot she'd earned through a fiercely competitive essay contest. Her winning piece, a groundbreaking exploration of dark matter, had impressed judges from universities across the country. This isn't a handout, she'd told her dad Robert. This is earned. And as the flight attendants offered her a warm towel and a pre-takeoff drink, Naomi felt a surge of pride, a quiet vindication that hard work and intellect could open any door, no matter how exclusive. She gazed out the large window, the tarmac stretching out below, dreaming of the vast cosmic ballet awaiting her, blissfully unaware of the earthly storm about to erupt in her perfectly crafted moment. The calm lasted only a few minutes. The cabin door was about to close when a new passenger entered her presence, radiating an almost aggressive sense of entitlement. This was Ms. Cordelia Sterling, a woman draped in designer clothes and an air of unmistakable superiority. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and expensive handbag seemed to announce her arrival louder than any flight attendant could. She surveyed the cabin, her gaze sweeping over the few remaining empty seats, then abruptly stopping on Naomi. A flicker of something unpleasant disbelief, annoyance, perhaps outright disdain, crossed Cordelia's face. "Excuse me?" Cordelia's voice, though initially hushed, had a sharp cutting edge. "There seems to be a mistake. That window seat is mine, and I expect it to be empty." Naomi looked up confused, then glanced at her boarding pass again. "Ma'am, I believe this is my assigned seat," she replied, her voice soft but firm, clutching the boarding pass tighter. "It's 1A." Cordelia let out a dismissive scoff, a sound that implied utter contempt. "Don't care what your little paper says. People like you don't belong in first class anyway." Her eyes, cold and assessing, swept over Naomi's simple but neat attire, lingering for a fraction too long on the rich brown of Naomi's skin. The unspoken assumption hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "You don't fit here." A knot of familiar anger twisted in Naomi's stomach. This wasn't the first time she'd faced such a blatant dismissal merely for existing in a space someone else deemed off-limits to people like her. It was the casual cruelty of it, the assumption of inferiority, based solely on appearance, that stung the most. "Ma'am, I earned this seat," Naomi stated, her voice trembling slightly but holding steady. "My name is Naomi Hayes, and I'm going to the Cosmic Frontiers Summit." Cordelia's face reddened, not with shame, but with a growing indignation. "Earned it. Don't insult my intelligence, girl. If you don't move, I'll call the flight attendant and security to have you removed. Now." She gestured dismissively with a perfectly manicured hand, as if swatting away a fly. The flight attendant, who had been observing the exchange with growing alarm, took a hesitant step forward, clearly uncomfortable, but unsure how to handle a passenger of Cordelia's aggressive demeanor. Before Naomi could even formulate a reply, before the flight attendant could intervene, Cordelia bent over her face, inches from Naomi's. The air crackled with a chilling, predatory tension. And then, without warning, Cordelia's hand shot out. Her long, manicured fingers clamped around Naomi's cheek, and with a shocking display of aggression, she pinched and pulled Naomi's face hard. The pain was immediate, sharp stinging. Naomi gasped instinctively, recoiling, her eyes wide with shock and a sudden profound fear. The humiliation burned hotter than the physical pain. It wasn't just a touch. It was an invasion, a deliberate violation, an attempt to physically assert dominance and dehumanize her. Her reflection in the window showed a face fighting to maintain dignity under the humiliating assault, a single tear threatening to escape. Her fingers, though trembling, found their way to her phone. Under the cover of her clutching hand, unseen by Cordelia, who was now loudly declaring her intentions to the startled cabin, Naomi typed a quick, desperate message. Just 3 words. 3 words that carried the weight of years of unspoken understanding. A plea for rescue from the most terrifying kind of trap. Dad. Help. Now. She knew her father Robert Maxwell would understand. He always did. But as Cordelia's shrill voice continued to echo through the cabin threatening to call security, Naomi looked out the window again. The plane was still on the ground. The door was still open. And she wondered in the face of such casual cruelty if anyone would truly stand up. The silence from the other passengers, the hesitation from the crew, it was deafening. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about whether she, a young black girl, had the right to exist unmolested in a space of privilege. The ground was still beneath them, but Naomi felt like her dreams were already plummeting, caught in an unseen cage. And the most dangerous part, no one had even seen the lock. The glow of the conference room screens illuminated Director Robert Maxwell's face, etched with the familiar focus of a man navigating the complexities of global security. He was deep in a highly classified briefing analyzing intelligence on a sophisticated cyber warfare threat, a puzzle of algorithms and encrypted data that could shake nations. His mind, usually a fortress of logic and protocol, was fully engaged. Then, a silent vibration. A text message. From Naomi. His thumb, accustomed to swift, decisive action, tapped the screen. The words hit him like a physical blow. Dad. Help. Now. The complex data on the screen in front of him blurred. The drone of the briefer's voice faded to a dull hum. Help! Now! Not a question. An urgent command from his usually calm, self-reliant daughter. A cold knot formed in his stomach, spreading quickly through his chest. He knew Naomi. For her to send such a message, for her to be in a situation where she needed him like that, it meant something was terribly wrong. This wasn't a scraped knee or a missed bus. This was something that had shaken his brilliant, resilient girl to her core. Robert's mind, trained for crisis, instantly shifted gears from national security to personal protection. Every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed one thing: his daughter. His job as Director Maxwell, with its critical briefings and international stakes, suddenly felt insignificant. His primary mission above all else was being a father. Being a single black father, especially one with a career as demanding and clandestine as his, had its own unique set of challenges. There were countless nights spent poring over case files instead of bedtime stories, early mornings leaving before she woke, and urgent calls that pulled him away from school plays or parent-teacher conferences. He'd wrestled with the guilt, the constant balancing act, but every sacrifice, every moment of absence was justified by the fiercely protective desire to create a safer, more just world for Naomi, a world where her dreams weren't constrained by the ignorance or prejudice of others. He'd taught her resilience, dignity, and the importance of speaking truth to power. Now it was time to put those lessons into action, not through words, but through his very presence. He stood up, cutting off the briefer mid-sentence, his voice calm but imbued with an undeniable authority that brooked no argument. Gentlemen, I apologize. This meeting is temporarily adjourned. I have an urgent family matter that requires my immediate attention. There was no explanation, no hesitation. The gravity in his tone was enough. Robert didn't summon an FBI motorcade or a flashing convoy. That wasn't his style, nor was it appropriate for a personal crisis. Instead, a discreet unmarked agency vehicle was dispatched, expertly navigating the afternoon traffic towards the airport. During the rapid drive, Robert made one call, a concise, clipped conversation with Airport Security Command. This is Director Maxwell. I need to be met at Gate C-12 immediately. Unidentified sensitive situation involving a minor passenger on Flight 789 to Chicago. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Simply clear a path for my direct access. Is that understood?" The voice on the other end, accustomed to obeying such precise high-level directives, simply confirmed. "Understood, Director. Path cleared." As the car pulled up to the curb, Robert stepped out, looking like any other well-dressed businessman in a dark suit, his gaze sweeping the bustling terminal with trained precision. He ignored the hurried crowds, his focus solely on the gate for Flight 789. As he approached, he could feel the shift in the atmosphere. A knot of onlookers, hushed whispers, and the strained posture of a flight attendant. He saw her, Cordelia Sterling, her back to him, her voice shrill and self-important, carrying clearly. "I don't care who she texted, this is a security matter. Get this, child removed." And then he saw Naomi sitting rigidly in the first-class seat, her shoulders hunched, her face drawn, but still holding herself with a quiet, stubborn dignity. A wave of cold fury, deeper and more potent than any anger he'd ever felt in a boardroom or a war room, washed over him. He moved quietly, purposefully through the throng. A nervous-looking gate agent, recognizing his approach from the earlier call, stammered, "Sir, I'm sorry, but there's a situation." This young lady, Robert simply offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes fixed on Cordelia Sterling. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. That wasn't how Robert Maxwell operated. He approached Cordelia from behind, his presence a quiet, almost unsettling force. She was still ranting, oblivious, her back to him. "And you, flight attendant?" Cordelia shrieked, gesturing wildly. "Are you going to do your job? Or do I need to call someone higher up? This girl obviously doesn't belong here." Just as Cordelia turned to confront the flight attendant, her eyes met Robert's. She paused, her voice dying in her throat. She saw a tall, composed black man, his face unreadable, simply standing there. Her initial reaction was dismissive, an automatic assumption of superiority. "And who are you?" she demanded, her tone laced with irritation. Another one of her friends trying to cause trouble. Robert didn't speak. He simply reached into his inside jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately. His movements were precise, almost cinematic. Cordelia watched, a sneer forming on her lips, expecting perhaps a wallet or a business card. But what he produced wasn't a card. It was a small, polished leather case. With a soft click, he flipped it open. The silver badge glinted under the cabin lights, catching every eye. An eagle, an insignia, and the bold, unmistakable letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below it, his name, Director Robert Maxwell. A gasp rippled through the now silent cabin. Cordelia Sterling's face, a moment ago contorted with anger, went utterly slack. The vibrant color drained from her cheeks, leaving her ashen, almost transparent. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. She looked at the badge, then at Robert, then at Naomi, then back to the badge again, as if willing it to be a trick of the light. The smug, self-assured air that had clung to her like a second skin evaporated, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. The man she had just insulted, the father of the girl she had physically assaulted, wasn't just anyone. He was the very embodiment of authority, the very law she had just flouted so brazenly. The uninvited guest was not Naomi. The uninvited guest, it turned out, was justice itself, arriving with a quiet, devastating certainty. And Cordelia Sterling, who thought she held all the power, was about to learn that her personal storm had just begun. The silence in the first-class cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cordelia Sterling, her face still a ghastly white, stammered, "Director Maxwell. But that's impossible. My husband, Alistair, he knows people. This is a mistake." Robert simply looked at her, his expression unyielding. "Ms. Sterling." His voice was calm, almost chillingly. "So, the only mistake made today was your decision to physically assault and publicly humiliate a minor, my daughter, on an aircraft, in full view of witnesses. The FBI has jurisdiction over acts of assault on commercial flights, among other things. Your husband's connections will not negate that." Two impeccably dressed, stoic FBI agents, who had quietly appeared from the main cabin entrance, as if summoned by Robert's mere presence, stepped forward. "Ms. Sterling," "Mr. Sterling," one of them stated, his voice flat and authoritative. "We'd like you to accompany us. We have some questions about an incident that just occurred." Alistair Sterling, who had been trying to blend into the background, now emerged pale and flustered. He was a man accustomed to pulling strings to whispered conversations in exclusive clubs to making problems disappear. But faced with the cold, unblinking authority of the FBI, his usual swagger evaporated. He looked at Robert, then at his wife, then at the badge, a dawning horror in his eyes. He knew exactly what this meant. This wasn't a minor squabble. This was the collapse of their carefully constructed world. As the agents calmly but firmly escorted the bewildered Sterlings off the plane, a stark contrast to Cordelia's earlier theatrical entrance, a collective, almost imperceptible sigh of relief swept through the cabin. Passengers who had averted their eyes now exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing between them. They had witnessed true power. Not the kind that bullies, but the kind that protects and upholds. Robert knelt beside Naomi, gently touching her cheek, his thumb brushing away the faint redness where Cordelia had grabbed her. "Are you all right, sweetie?" he asked, his voice now soft, infused with deep concern. Naomi nodded, still a little shaken, but a spark of something resilient, something like awe shining in her eyes as she looked at her father. I think so, Dad. Thank you." Her voice was still a whisper, but it carried the weight of profound relief. Robert then addressed the flight attendant, who was visibly flustered. "I understand this was a difficult situation for you," he said, his tone empathetic but firm. "However, protocols for passenger safety and intervention against assault must be clear. We will follow up with the airline directly to review these procedures." It wasn't an accusation, but a clear statement of expectation, ensuring that transglobal airlines would also be held accountable for the environment that allowed such an incident to escalate. He wasn't interested in personal vengeance. He was interested in systemic correction. This was the hallmark of Robert Maxwell's approach, calm, strategic, and always focused on the bigger picture. The fallout for Cordelia and Alistair Sterling was swift and severe, a stark reminder that even perceived invincibility can shatter in the face of legitimate authority and a determined truth. Alistair Sterling, it turned out, was not just a prominent corporate lawyer. He was a senior partner at a firm deeply embedded in lucrative federal contracts, specializing in intellectual property and compliance for major government projects. His firm's reputation, and by extension his own career, relied entirely on unimpeachable integrity and discretion. The moment news of the incident, coupled with Robert Maxwell's direct involvement, reached the ears of his firm's managing partners, the implications were catastrophic. Robert, ever the strategic operator, didn't just have Bethany and Alistair detained. He placed a carefully worded call to the managing partner of Alistair's law firm, outlining the incident with cold, factual precision. He didn't make demands. He simply stated the facts, emphasizing the public nature of the assault, the racial undertones, and the undeniable involvement of his daughter, a minor, and himself, a high-ranking federal official. The managing partner, terrified of losing multi-million-dollar government contracts and facing a public relations nightmare, understood the unspoken message perfectly. Within 24 hours, Alistair Sterling was put on immediate administrative leave, a polite euphemism for being quietly pushed out, his career in shambles. Cordelia, stripped of her husband's powerful shield, found her own social and professional circles rapidly closing. Her charitable board positions vanished. Invitations to exclusive galas dried up. Her reputation, once a gilded cage of privilege, was now a shattered spectacle of public humiliation. This rapid downfall underscored a crucial lesson: privilege, when divorced from principle, is a flimsy, self-serving illusion. Cordelia had wielded her perceived status like a weapon, believing it rendered her untouchable. But Robert Maxwell embodied a different kind of power, one rooted in justice in law and in the quiet, undeniable authority of integrity. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. He simply needed to reveal the truth, and the system, however imperfect, was forced to respond. This was the profound difference. Cordelia's power was built on exclusion and contempt. Robert's power was built on protection and accountability. Later that evening, back in the quiet sanctuary of their home, Naomi sat on the couch with her father, the silence between them a comfortable healing balm. The television hummed softly in the background, a stark contrast to the chaos of the airplane. "Dad." Naomi finally said, her voice small. "Do you think she—" "Bethany Caldwell, I mean. Do you think she learned anything?" The question hung in the air, weighted with the complex emotions of a young girl trying to reconcile profound injustice with the hope for change. Or will she just be angry about being humiliated? Robert considered this thoughtfully. He appreciated his daughter's capacity for reflection, even about someone who had treated her so poorly. "People like that rarely change completely, sweetie," he admitted, his voice soft. "Especially not from a single incident. Deep-seated prejudices are like old trees. Their roots run deep." He paused, looking at his daughter, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. "But sometimes experiences like this create cracks in their certainty. Small openings where new understanding might eventually take root. It's not about forgiveness for her, Naomi. It's about holding people accountable and protecting those who are vulnerable." "I hope so," Naomi said quietly, not for Cordelia's sake, but for a greater purpose. Not for her, but for her children if she has any. That kind of thinking, it hurts the people who hold it as much as the people it's directed against. Her insight struck Robert deeply. His daughter, despite her trauma, was already grasping a truth that many adults failed to see. For Cordelia Sterling, her lesson came through public humiliation and the recognition that her husband's illustrious career, and by extension their lavish lifestyle, now hung in the precarious balance of Director Maxwell's discretion. For Naomi, it came through witnessing her father's principles in action, seeing that the same authority that so often took him away for national emergencies could also be wielded with restraint and wisdom specifically to protect her. And for Robert, it came through the profound recognition that no security briefing, no counterterrorism operation, no national emergency could ever be more important than being truly present for the moments that shaped his daughter's understanding of herself and her rightful place in a world that might try sometimes violently to deny it. The battle for justice didn't just happen on a global scale. It happened intimately and urgently right in the first-class cabin of a commercial airplane. And this was just the beginning of a larger story, one that echoed through generations. The quiet comfort of the Maxwell home, the warmth of the fireplace, the familiar scent of Naomi's favorite tea. It was a sanctuary. But even in peace, the echoes lingered. For Robert Maxwell, the incident on the plane was more than just a public humiliation of a prejudiced woman. It was a reignition of old fires, a stark reminder of battles fought long before Naomi ever stepped onto that aircraft. His calm resolve, his unwavering certainty in the face of Cordelia Sterling's venom, wasn't born in a vacuum. It was forged in a lifetime of unseen battles, of navigating treacherous currents in systems that were never designed for him. Robert's journey into the labyrinthine world of federal law enforcement had begun decades ago, a young, ambitious black man with a keen intellect and an unshakable moral compass. He remembered his first days at the FBI Academy, the subtle stares, the unspoken doubts in the eyes of some instructors. He was always good enough, often better, but he always had to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. He recalled countless instances, both subtle and blatant. The time a promotion he was clearly qualified for went to a less experienced white colleague with a vague explanation about fit or leadership style. The raised eyebrows when he presented an innovative strategy in a meeting only for the same idea to be praised when later reiterated by a white peer. The exhaustion of constantly needing to prove his competence, his loyalty, his very right to be there. He learned to move in the shadows of systemic racism, understanding its insidious nature. It wasn't always a shouted slur or a physical assault like Cordelia's. Often, it was the quiet exclusion, the overlooked contribution, the assumptions made before a single word was spoken. It was the feeling of walking into a room and knowing that for some, his presence alone was a statement, a challenge to their preconceived notions of who held power. Robert learned early on that fighting every battle loudly would only exhaust him. Instead, he chose his fights, he built his alliances, and he honed his skills to an undeniable sharpness. He became indispensable. There was one man, an old grizzled Irish-American agent named Frank O'Malley, who saw past the racial lens. O'Malley, a veteran of the civil rights era investigations, had a nose for injustice and a grudging respect for anyone who could outsmart him. He took Robert under his wing, not with platitudes, but with tough love and practical advice. Maxwell, O'Malley would grumble, "They ain't gonna hand you nothing. You gotta take it. But you gotta take it smart. Learn their rules, then play by your own." It was O'Malley who taught Robert the art of strategic patience, of waiting for the precise moment to strike, to expose injustice, not with emotion, but with undeniable facts and unassailable authority. It was O'Malley who saw Robert's quiet strength, his principled resolve, and understood that these were the true hallmarks of a leader regardless of the color of his skin. The incident with Naomi wasn't just a personal affront. It was a painful echo of Robert's own past, amplified by the innocent vulnerability of his daughter. But unlike his own early career, where he often had to fight alone, Naomi had him. This was the generational shift. He fought his battles to open doors. She would walk through them, and together they would ensure those doors stayed open for others. Robert Maxwell understood that the confrontation on Flight 789 wasn't just about one prejudiced woman and her husband. It was a symptom of a much larger, deeper issue that permeated society, including the very industries that were supposed to connect people. He knew that simply punishing Cordelia Sterling, while satisfying, wouldn't dismantle the invisible barriers that so many faced daily. His influence, meticulously built over decades, would be used not for personal retribution, but for systemic reform. He immediately initiated a series of high-level discussions with the Transportation Security Administration, TSA major airline executives, and relevant government bodies. His proposals were precise, data-driven, and undeniable. He pushed for mandatory, rigorous, unconscious bias training for all airport and airline personnel, from ground crew to flight attendants, pilots, and security screeners. This wasn't just a tick-box exercise. He advocated for programs developed by experts in social psychology, focusing on practical scenarios and real-world impact. He also worked with the Department of Justice to develop stricter guidelines and expedited reporting mechanisms for passengers experiencing discrimination or harassment on commercial flights, ensuring that victims had clear avenues for recourse and perpetrators faced swift consequences. Robert also spearheaded initiatives within the FBI itself. Drawing on his own experiences, he launched the Pathway to Justice program, specifically designed to identify and mentor talented young individuals from underrepresented communities, guiding them through the rigorous application process and supporting them through their training. "We need agents who reflect the diversity of the nation they serve," Robert stated in an internal memo, agents who understand the nuances of discrimination, not just in theory, but from lived experience. That understanding is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength in upholding justice for all. And he championed the inclusion of diverse perspectives in policymaking, recognizing that a truly effective federal agency must be informed by the diverse experiences of the population. His work, though often behind the scenes, began to create a significant ripple effect. Other major airlines, wary of negative publicity and keen to align with best practices, started to adopt similar anti-discrimination policies and training programs. While none dared mention the Sterling incident by name, the message was clear: the public was watching, and high-profile incidents had irreversible consequences. Robert discreetly consulted with several CEOs, sharing his insights on creating genuinely inclusive environments, not just for optics, but for operational excellence. He highlighted how diversity led to better problem-solving, improved customer service, and ultimately, a more resilient and profitable industry. This wasn't an easy fight. There was resistance, of course, from those who benefited from the old systems, from those who clung to their biases. But Robert, armed with the undeniable truth of Naomi's experience and his own lifetime of navigating prejudice, proved that personal trauma, when channeled constructively, can become a powerful force for widespread positive change. The seeds of systemic change were being sown, watered by a father's protective love, and nourished by an unwavering commitment to justice. The story of the first-class incident, while initially reported with altered names to protect Naomi's privacy, quickly went viral. Anonymous accounts, eyewitness testimonials, and even a secretly recorded snippet of Cordelia Sterling's initial outburst circulated across social media platforms. It sparked a torrent of conversations, both online and offline. People shared their own first-class incident moments, the times they were questioned, underestimated, or outright discriminated against in everyday spaces simply because of their race or appearance. The comments sections overflowed with shared pain, but also with collective outrage and a powerful sense of solidarity. For many in the audience, Naomi's dignified composure in the face of such ugly prejudice resonated deeply. They had been in similar situations, perhaps not on a plane, but in a store at work, or simply walking down the street. They understood the gut-wrenching decision. Do I speak up and risk further confrontation, or do I swallow the insult and protect my peace? Robert Maxwell's calm, authoritative intervention became a symbol of what effective allyship and legitimate power could achieve. People discussed his strategy, his timing, the quiet dignity of his reveal. One passenger, a quiet, unassuming man named Marcus Chen, who had been sitting 2 rows behind Naomi, had witnessed the entire ordeal. Initially, Marcus, a mid-level manager at a major tech firm, had felt the familiar discomfort, the urge to intervene, but also the paralyzing fear of escalation. But when Robert Maxwell stepped in, when that FBI badge flashed, Marcus felt a profound shift. He saw justice unfold with dignity and power, not aggression. It inspired him. Months later, in a team meeting at his own company where a similar subtle bias was at play, Marcus, usually reserved, spoke up. He referenced the first-class incident, without details of course, talking about the responsibility of those in power to dismantle prejudice. He initiated a conversation that ultimately led to his company reviewing its own internal diversity practices. The ripple effect was subtle, yet profound. It wasn't about a single viral moment of shame for Cordelia Sterling. It was about sparking 1,000 conversations, prompting 1,000,000 self-reflections, and inspiring countless individuals to take small, courageous steps in their own lives and communities. The initial wound of Naomi's trauma, transformed by her father's wisdom and action, was beginning to lay the groundwork for a new foundation, one built on understanding, respect, and the unshakable truth that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity. And this legacy, a testament to Naomi's resilience and Robert's unwavering commitment, was only just beginning to take flight. Years flowed like currents, carrying Naomi Hayes far from the confines of that first-class cabin, yet always propelling her forward with the quiet strength forged that day. The sting of Cordelia Sterling's prejudice had faded, not erased, but transformed into a catalyst. It hadn't broken her. It had sharpened her resolve, deepened her empathy, and cemented her purpose. Now, a decade after the incident that made headlines, albeit with carefully altered names, Dr. Naomi Hayes stood in front of a sprawling holographic display, her voice resonating with confidence and clarity. The room was packed with the brightest minds in astrophysics, her peers, her mentors, and aspiring young scientists. She was presenting her groundbreaking research on exoplanetary atmospheres, a theoretical framework that could revolutionize humanity's search for habitable worlds. Her work was intricate, complex, demanding. It required not just brilliance, but an unyielding focus, a trait honed by facing adversity head-on. She remembered the sheer audacity of Cordelia Sterling, the feeling of being reduced to nothing more than her skin color. That memory, once painful, now served as a quiet reminder: never let anyone define your potential. The very universe she studied, vast and impartial, offered a profound contrast to the narrow-mindedness she'd encountered. In the cosmos, there were no first-class or economy sections for stars, only boundless possibility. Naomi didn't just excel in her field, she became a quiet advocate for inclusion within it. She mentored young students from diverse backgrounds, ensuring they felt seen, heard, and supported in a field that, like many others, had historically lacked representation. She understood that sometimes the greatest barriers to entry weren't intellectual, but systemic. She became a living testament to the fact that talent knows no race, no gender, no socioeconomic status. Her lectures weren't just about science. They subtly wove in themes of perseverance, of dismantling unseen barriers, of the grit required to chase a dream when the world tries to tell you to sit down. Robert Maxwell's career, too, continued its ascent, but it was a climb fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. The first-class incident wasn't just a personal victory. It was a powerful public demonstration of his unwavering commitment to justice. He didn't just oversee investigations. He became a driving force behind systemic change within the FBI and beyond. He was instrumental in establishing the Robert Maxwell Diversity and Inclusion Initiative within the Bureau, a comprehensive program designed to recruit, mentor, and promote agents from historically marginalized communities. This initiative wasn't merely about quotas. It was about transforming the culture from within. He pushed for curriculum reforms in the academy, ensuring that new agents received extensive training in cultural competency, implicit bias, and community engagement. Robert understood that effective law enforcement wasn't just about enforcing laws, but about understanding the communities it served and building trust where trust had been eroded. He used his platform to advocate for a more representative justice system, speaking at national conferences, advising policymakers, and quietly lobbying for legislation that promoted equity. His presence in the highest echelons of federal law enforcement became a beacon for countless others who aspired to serve, but who had long felt excluded. He was a testament to the idea that true power lay not in enforcing the status quo, but in evolving it, brick by painful brick. The landscape of corporate America, including the aviation industry, began to shift. The old guard figures like Cordelia Sterling, slowly but surely, began to fade, or were quietly ushered out of positions of influence. The direct aftermath of the incident, coupled with Robert Maxwell's sustained advocacy and the increased public scrutiny, amplified by viral stories, created an environment where blatant prejudice became less tolerable and genuine diversity initiatives gained traction. It wasn't a perfect transformation, and progress was often agonizingly slow, but the direction was clear. Companies realized that diversity wasn't just a moral imperative. It was a business necessity leading to better innovation, broader customer bases, and a more resilient workforce. And what of Cordelia Sterling and Alistair? Their world, once so rigidly defined by their privilege, had indeed fractured. Alistair's career at the prestigious law firm crumbled the stain of public scandal, and the quiet but devastating pressure from federal contracts proving too much to overcome. He moved into a less visible, less lucrative role, his influence severely curtailed. Cordelia, stripped of her husband's social standing and her own gilded reputation, found herself exiled from the elite circles she had once commanded. Her charitable board memberships were revoked, her social calendar emptied. The power she had so carelessly wielded had recoiled upon her, leaving her isolated in a world she no longer recognized. Did they truly learn? Robert's earlier reflection echoed, "People like that rarely change completely. But sometimes, experiences like this create cracks in their certainty." For Alistair, the lesson was pragmatic. The cold, hard reality of professional and financial consequence. For Cordelia, the lesson was one of profound public humiliation and social ostracization. Perhaps in her bitter solitude, a sliver of understanding, however grudging, began to take root. Not empathy, perhaps, but a raw recognition of the power dynamics she had so misjudged. There were no public apologies from them, no grand gestures of remorse. The transformation, if any, remained internal, a quiet footnote in the larger narrative of justice. The system, though imperfect, had delivered a consequence, not a cure. But the story wasn't truly about their transformation. It was about the evolving landscape, the foundations being built by people like Robert and Naomi. It was about the unwavering commitment to a future where dignity was a birthright, not a privilege, and where every dream, no matter how audacious, had the undeniable right to take flight. The seeds of change sown in the discomfort of a public confrontation, and nurtured by years of dedicated effort, were now blossoming, promising a horizon that stretched far beyond any limit.